The Franklin expedition. 129 men vanished into the ice. They had the best ships, the best technology, and enough supplies to last 3 years. Every single man died anyway, and for over a century and a half, nobody could say exactly how. In 1845, 2 British ships sailed into the Arctic with 129 men aboard, searching for a route that didn't need to be found the way they found it. Not one of them came home. What happened to them became one of the most haunting mysteries in the history of exploration, and what modern science eventually discovered inside their own bones would prove far more disturbing than anyone had imagined. Sir John Franklin, an experienced Royal Navy officer already in his late 50s, set out in May of 1845, commanding 2 state-of-the-art vessels, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, on a mission to chart and navigate the Northwest Passage, a long theorized sea route connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the frozen waters of the Canadian Arctic. The expedition was, by the standards of the era, extraordinarily well prepared, carrying reinforced hulls specifically designed to withstand crushing pack ice, steam engines for auxiliary power, and enough preserved food supplies to sustain the crew for up to 3 years if necessary, reflecting the British Admiralty's confidence that this expedition would finally succeed, where previous attempts, stretching back decades, had repeatedly failed against the sheer scale and unpredictability of Arctic conditions. The ships were last seen by European whalers in Baffin Bay in late July of 1845, reporting favorable conditions and the crew in good spirits, before vanishing from any further contact with the outside world. When no word arrived over the following 2 years, concern mounted, eventually escalating into one of the largest and most expensive search operations in exploration history, funded partly by the British government and partly by Franklin's own determined wife, Lady Jane Franklin, who refused to accept her husband's death without proof, and spent years organizing search efforts long after official operations had been abandoned, personally commissioning multiple private expeditions and appealing directly to naval officials, foreign governments, and the public to keep the search alive. The first substantial evidence wasn't discovered until 1850, when search parties located the expedition's first winter camp on Beechey Island, including 3 marked graves belonging to crew members who died early in the voyage. It wasn't until 1859, 14 years after departure, that searchers finally recovered a written note left in a stone cairn, revealing the ships had become trapped in ice near King William Island in 1846, that Franklin himself died in June of 1847, and that by April of 1848, the remaining 105 surviving crew members had abandoned the icebound ships entirely, attempting a desperate overland trek towards the Canadian mainland in a last calculated bid for survival. None of those 105 men were ever found alive. Scattered human remains, discarded equipment, and skeletal evidence recovered across various sites along the presumed route painted an increasingly grim picture. Men dying incrementally through some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth, their supplies dwindling and strength failing, with essentially no realistic chance of reaching help before the Arctic conditions overwhelmed them entirely. What genuinely shocked modern researchers, once scientific analysis became possible using techniques unavailable to 19th century investigators, was evidence the crew had resorted to cannibalism in their final days. Forensic examination of recovered remains revealed distinctive cut marks consistent with deliberate defleshing, corroborating disturbing oral accounts collected decades earlier from local Inuit communities, who had reported encountering desperate, starving Europeans and later finding evidence some of the dead had been consumed by their surviving companions. These accounts had been dismissed and even ridiculed by British authorities and the Victorian press at the time, who considered the testimony of Indigenous witnesses beneath serious consideration, a dismissal that delayed genuine understanding of the expedition's fate for well over a century, until modern forensic science finally confirmed the Inuit had been accurate all along. Researchers also identified another significant factor: lead poisoning. Analysis of preserved remains revealed elevated lead levels, likely originating from the ship's water distillation systems and the lead solder sealing their extensive supply of tinned food, a relatively new preservation technology at the time. Some researchers argue this exposure may have compounded the crew's physical and cognitive decline, potentially impairing judgment during the exact period when clear decision-making was most desperately needed for any realistic chance of survival. For over 165 years, the physical wrecks themselves remained undiscovered until Canadian researchers, working extensively with traditional Inuit oral history passed down across generations, finally located HMS Erebus in 2014, followed by HMS Terror in 2016, both remarkably well preserved, found in locations substantially closer to where Inuit accounts had consistently indicated all along, information British search expeditions had largely dismissed or failed to properly investigate for over a century. What makes the Franklin expedition endure as one of history's most haunting exploration disasters isn't simply the tragic scale of loss, all 129 men eventually perishing without a single survivor returning to tell the story, but the layered nature of how the truth was uncovered, revealing not just the expedition's collapse into starvation and cannibalism, but a quieter tragedy of colonial-era authorities repeatedly dismissing accurate indigenous testimony that could have resolved the mystery over a century earlier. The wrecks of Erebus and Terror sit today exactly where local knowledge said they would be found all along, a permanent reminder that sometimes the answer to history's most enduring mysteries was available far sooner than anyone in power was willing to listen. If stories like this, where history's most enduring mysteries were finally solved by listening to the very people who had known the truth all along, are exactly what you come here for, subscribe to The Grave Details, because history holds more stories like this than most people will ever know.